Welcome to the channel, Scott Scratch HTX. Don't forget the HTX. And I am YouTube super excited about today's episode. Notice anything different about this base model V4 Streetfighter? How about now? How about now? I've always been a big supporter of buying a base model bike and building it the way you want, especially with the suspension. These forks, I've been told I'm the first one to have them in the United States. Now let me clarify what I mean by that. If you wanted these forks before, you would have to get a generic form of them and then modify the other components around there to fit what you had bought. You couldn't get them in a bolt-on package. You could for Yamaha, but you couldn't do it for V4 Ducati. Now you can. And what I've been told is they did 5 orders of these fork tubes. I know I was the first one to put in the order. And I know the second ones were being loaded into a truck as I was pulling in to get this suspension put in. The second ones were being loaded on somebody's truck and driven out. I don't know about the other 3. These are the 250 series FKR front forks. And I'll read to you, sorry about that, from their pamphlet. It says, for the new FGR 250 series Ohlins, engineers set out to target to fill the gap between the popular FGR T200 and our top-of-the-line FGR 300 front fork. That's what those are, the 250 series. The question is, why? I'll give you 3 reasons why I like to build base model bikes, especially from the suspension parameters. One is you get to build these forks and these shocks to your weight. The second is you can spend as much or as little as money as you want. The V4S Streetfighter, I think, is $5,500 more than this base model. Depending on the type of front forks you get and shocks you get, you can be under that amount, on that amount, or over that amount, depending on what you want to spend and what kind of ride you like. The third thing is components. The components on the off-the-rack Ohlins front forks are much different than what you get on a Ohlins suspension from the showroom floor. We'll start by adding some fluff pieces of us installing the suspension. I'll add some of my support for my arguments, we'll throw in some technical jargon, and then I'm going to add some third-party support to my arguments from another YouTuber. Somebody has a lot more subscribership than I do, big time. I actually like that these guys have found success from moving on from the corporate media sponsor. And it's ironic that they did a piece and released it the day that I got this suspension installed. It was entitled, "Is Upgrading Your Suspension Worth It?" They basically took a Ninja 400 and updated the stock suspension to an Ohlins unit and then did a comparison in many different ways. It was pretty good technical stuff that was added to it as well. But they basically proved my point during that video.
New FGR 254 plug and play to the Ducati V4. No additional pieces needed. Takes the stock axle, brakes, fenders, triple clamps, everything. So when you can bounce it back and forth like it's butter, they're lined up at the bottom. By pinching one of those nuts, it's going to keep the axle from rotating, so you can actually tighten this guy. Okay, and it doesn't have to be super tight, just a nice little snug, right? So your axle is 25 millimeters. See how big it is on this side? And see right here, it tapers down?
Right, exactly.
So from this point on, it goes down to 25 millimeters all the way over. So if it was possible, we could actually remove this fork leg and the entire wheel would be held to this fork. Because that shoulder is against this, pulling the whole wheel to this fork, okay? So what we did is we just pulled the whole wheel to this fork, and because of this spacer, that puts it in the center of the calipers. We tightened this. That pinch bolt's there, so this won't rotate. Now we're going to tighten these guys so that it holds the tension on that nut. All right, so And do this whenever you got to do a wheel change. Doesn't matter if it's your V2 or any of those bikes. And by the way, the torque spec on these is 19 Newton meters or 2 Ugga-Duggas.
Okay.
Ugga-Dugga. Just kind of go back and forth until you got the same feeling.
It's a 1, 2, 3,
yeah.
right? 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Okay, so
like 3 times.
Now that those are tight, literally we can take this fork leg off and this axle will be holding this wheel to that fork leg. So what we did though, is if you visualize the forks, and I just tightened it, I just did this to this fork leg. So this this leg is hanging straight. This fork leg, by tightening my axle, I pulled it all to this side, so I just did this to that fork leg. So now this fork leg has stiction in it, and it'll wear the seal out. So I'll come back over here, and I'm gonna loosen this one up. Because what I want you to watch, I want you to watch that axle to the fork. Watch, it'll move. Ready? See it go in?
Yeah.
Let's see how I can like flex it.
Yep.
You can flex it in. So what you're doing is you take this off now because the whole axle is hold to this side. Release that and just kind of flex on it a couple times. Some people like to put it on the ground and bounce it.
That's what's in the instructions or the manual.
So,
not the owner's manual, but the service manual.
Yep, so what's happening now is this fork leg is relaxed. Okay. So it just came back to neutral. So once it's back to neutral, now you can come over and tighten your spin plates.
Big Time went out to track on the stock units, and then they went out to the track on the Ohlins updated units, which I think were FKS units that they put on the front forks. They pulled off the track and they said, it's not right. And the reason they gave is proving my point. Not in the most optimal way, and I'm choosing my words kind of carefully because I don't want Big Time to come and punch me in the face, but they said it was their weight. The springs that they installed with that FKS unit was too lightly sprung for the person's weight. Maybe you should have pushed away the donuts a little bit earlier. See what I did there? People in the know will know what that means. These bikes, off the showroom floor, I'm convinced are really weighted for somebody 160 to 100, ultimately 180 pounds. That's not me. So I want to go out there and I might as well start with a base model bike and add the componentry and the level of componentry that I want and pay the price that I want rather than have something put on me from a higher end unit. I don't know why they didn't order the right spring rate for the person's weight that was going to be riding. I don't know that, but the point is, they made my point for me.
Sax, jump, Ohlins good.
Let me get this straight. This remote selector hooks to these 2 bolts, but with this exhaust, aftermarket exhaust, it's not compatible, right?
That's correct.
So what we really
because by the time you turn this bracket up in here and try to fold it,
yeah, it's all in the way.
It's in the way.
Yep.
So the fix for it is to get rid of the hose-mounted preload and go to a regular hydraulic preload that uses an 8mm hex driver.
So we just got to take all
and
this
it'll
apart.
sit in here clock like this.
Okay, so we just have to take all this apart.
So this has to come apart, the spring has to come off, this adjuster comes off, this adjuster goes on, put it all back on, and then we're functional.
Alright. Is it is?
Yep.
Okay. That will work. Took a little bit to actually take that back apart, put that part in there, but this solves that adapter problem.
And don't forget to have an Ohlins shock press.
Components. The units that you pull off the rack from Ohlins, much different than the units that are on the bikes on the showroom floor. The Streetfighter V4S has an NIX system on it, and the components inside that, I've been told, are much different than components that you pull off the shelf. I've heard things from reliable sources that the internals inside those forks are very different. Even the coating goes up much higher, maybe a different coating to reduce, or a thicker coating to reduce stiction. I don't have the ability to take a showroom NIX system off a V4S and take it apart and then compare it to an NIX system off the rack. But I do have something I can show you that supports the argument. This is a picture of the NIX front fork, bottom section of the fork, and it's a cast piece. This is a picture of the NIX system off the rack. This is a milled piece. That's very, very different. You can make the argument that the showroom floor bikes are trying to make a piece for sale as economic as possible. Comments are totally welcome on this. If you have any support from that, I'd love to hear it. Any arguments against it? Shoot, go right ahead. I did a preview of this bike in stock suspension form, and it wasn't favorable in the suspension category. You probably have already guessed that. But now that I have this suspension on there and the forged wheels and Supercorsa tires, oh my gosh, the difference is unbelievable. Maybe I'll go out to track sometime and we'll really show what this thing can do. Talk about the cons for a second. Yes, if you go out and buy a Streetfighter V4S, you do get the electronic suspension. I'm not a big user of electronic suspension. I kind of like the analog approach to it, but that is an argument against my position. Kind of up to you what you want to do. You guys keep on keeping on. We'll catch you next time.